everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my July wrap-up. July was a bit of a funny month for me, so it started off really great. It was Cant and Adobo and I thought I was doing really good with it and my reading goals were being met. I was participating in 2 different readathons, 3 actually, for the first week of July, and I thought I was doing really well. Then I got the unexpected call being recalled back to work at the gym that I work at because Ontario had gone into its stage 3 of reopening from the COVID-19 lockdown. It's the 3rd lockdown we've had since 2020 March. I was not excited because I think I've made it quite clear during all my reading vlogs that I don't do as well with my goals while I'm at work. And it was definitely came to a head during the month of July. So I read less than I normally would have, and I did not complete my Cant and Adobo, which I'm very sad about. But what I did read was pretty much mostly all fantastic reads. So let's just get right into the books that I read during the month of July. So the first book that I read during the month of July was The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This is a graphic novel series, I think it's either middle grade or YA, that tells the story of a magical world in which dragons are kind of domesticated. They are people's pets, companions, lovely little creatures, and the main character ends up stumbling upon a tea dragon. Finds out that there is a small little group of people that are the last remaining members of the Tea Dragon Society, a group of people that are determined to care for and cultivate tea dragons as their life's goal. This book is adorable and it is such a sweet story. It is queer, it is whimsical, it is magical, and these tea dragons are precious and I want them for myself. If anybody knows of anywhere you can buy little plushies of these guys, I want them. The illustrations are just beautiful. They're very bright and colorful and just very soft lines and just very cozy, and I adored it so much. I definitely will be continuing on with the series. I think they're on the 3rd book now and I just absolutely adored it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read one of BookTube's favorites for the year, and that was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Emily Henry is the beloved author of Beach Read, which was a sensation last year, and this is her 2nd novel, which is just as big of a sensation, I'd say, as Beach Read. This is an adult romance story that tells the story of Alex and Poppy, who are best friends from university that have kind of grown apart over the 10 or so years since university has ended. Alex and Poppy couldn't be more dissimilar. Alex is a book nerd, writer, teacher, and Poppy is a travel blogger and writer living in New York City, living the high life. The 2 of them met unexpectedly during university and they became best friends quite quickly. And the way that they have maintained their friendship is that every single year, no matter where they're living, no matter what they're doing, they take a summer trip. These trips are their way of staying in contact and staying friends. Till one year, 2 years before the start of this book, they end up having a falling out during their summer trip and they haven't really spoken since. Poppy is feeling kind of very unfulfilled with her life, despite living in a fantastic apartment and working for this great travel magazine. She's feeling very unfulfilled and remembering the last time she was truly happy was when she was on her summer trips with her best friend Alex. So she reaches out after 2 years of silence and offers to take him on one final summer trip. Interspersed between the chapters that are dealing with the present day, you also get glimpses into the summer trips of the past with Alex and Poppy, and you get to watch their relationship flourish and their friendship grow, and all the way until you get to see the falling out of their relationship 2 years before the start of the story. I love these 2 characters so much. Both Alex and Poppy are precious, in my opinion. And, unpopular opinion on Book Talk, I think friends to lovers is the superior trope. It was just so fun watching these characters get to know each other and really get to love each other platonically, and then watch that love grow into a romantic love over time, and it was so, so sweet. It really helped give me a travel itch, and it bit me with the travel bug, which is very unfortunate considering the time we are in right now. But it definitely made me reminisce about all my traveling that I have done and made me want to go on a vacation so badly. Absolutely loved it, 5 out of 5 stars. I can't decide if I liked it more than Beach Read. I think when I first finished it, I decided I did, but thinking back on it, I think they're both pretty equal in my opinion. Next up is the one and only dud that I've read during the month of July, and that was Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. This was described as a creepy I don't know, atmospheric dark academia book, and I did not get it at all. I couldn't even tell you the main character's name. I really didn't like her, and she kind of like fell right out of my mind. But this tells the story of Catherine House, which is a university set in the middle of, or in like the middle of nowhere, like New England, I think. And the gist of this university is basically that tuition is free. You can come in whenever you like. It's really hard to get into this school, but once you do, you have to pledge to give yourself over to the school 100% for the 3 years that you were there. It's basically like you don't get access to a telephone, you don't get access to the news, nothing relevant from the outside world can come into Catherine House while you were there, and you were not allowed to leave. There's definitely some hinky vibes going on, and I will give this book this, the vibes were immaculate. I love the setting of Catherine House, and I love the eerie gothic vibes that came from it. However, the main character drove me crazy. She gave me huge manic pixie dream girl vibes from like early 2000s movies, like picture Summer from 500 Days of Summer, and it just turned me right off. She didn't seem to care about anything that was happening in this story, and because of that, I think the narration was lacking, because nothing was fully explored. Like, there was definitely something hinky going on in the school, and it was very obvious that there was some type of an experiment going on with the students. However, because the main character couldn't give a shit, it didn't get explored very well enough, and I don't think it got analyzed very well. Which is really what I wanted from the story. I wanted to know more about what was going on at Catherine House. I wanted to know what it was doing with its students, and I appreciate sometimes a kind of unreliable narrator and having there be questions at the end, but in my opinion there were too many questions. I just didn't feel like this book was very developed enough, and I think that the plot lacked way too much for the characters to uphold, especially considering how much I hated the characters. Overall, it just wasn't really it for me. It didn't scare me as much as I wanted it to, and I just was so frustrated with the main character that it kind of soured it for me a little bit. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars, and that was being a bit generous, and that was purely because of the vibes. Next up, on a better note, is probably my favorite book that I read this month, and that is Dial A For Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is a adult romance, I guess, book following our main character Medi, who is the daughter of a Chinese-Indonesian family living in America. Medi feels like there is a curse on her family that she is definitely a part of, in which all of the men in her family tend to either die or leave. None of them stick around, so Medi is living with her mother and her 3 aunties, all of whom have been left by their husbands, or their husbands are no longer in the picture. So Medi thinks that she is cursed in the romantic sense, and so one day when her mother ends up setting her up on a blind date, the blind date goes horribly wrong and she accidentally kills her blind date. After accidentally killing her blind date, Medi calls her aunties and they come to help her bury the body. However, they all are due at a wedding that they are all working because they have a wedding business early in the next morning, so they end up hiding the body, and lo and behold, it ends up accidentally getting shipped to the venue the next morning. Medi and her family have to try and navigate this wedding that they are working, trying to maintain their public image and their reputation as a company, while also doing a whole weekend at Bernie's kind of thing, while trying to keep this body hidden from everybody around them in order to take care of it. There's definitely an element of having to suspend your disbelief during this, because it is one of the most ridiculous storylines I've ever heard of in my life, but it was so much fun and it was such a good time. This book was hilarious. The aunties themselves and their banter just had me cackling. They are so funny, and her relationship with them was hysterical. As like the cherry on top of this entire ridiculous story, it turns out that the little private island resort that they are at this wedding at is run by Medi's one true love from university that they haven't spoken to in years. So she's been bombarded by her ex while trying to deal with this dead body and also take the photos because she's the photographer. It's just such a crazy turn of events, but it was just so much fun, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Everybody should read this. It was so goddamn funny. Next up, I read another booktube fave, and that was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, her most recent release. Taylor Jenkins Reid is the beloved author of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, and this is the 3rd book set in the same kind of universe that the other 2 are set in. This is set in the 1980s, and it follows the 4 children of Mick Rava, who is a super famous rock star and also one of Evelyn Hugo's wives from 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. He was the one that they got married in Vegas, and the marriage lasted like 3 days. It was a cute little tie-in, I really appreciated it, but this followed the main 4 characters on the day that they hold their annual massive house party, where anyone and everyone in Hollywood ends up at this party at some point in another. The story starts off at 7 a.m. on the night of the party, and it ends 24 hours later when Malibu ends up in flames as a result of this party. Along the way, you get flashbacks to the children's childhoods, as well as flashbacks to McRaven meeting their mother June and their relationship and how it evolved and eventually broke down over time. This was such a great story about family and learning your place in the world and in relation to your family members. I really enjoyed it. I loved these main characters, and I loved the setting of 1980s Malibu and the glitz and glamour of the high society at that time. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid does a fantastic job at historical fiction set during the height of Hollywood in both the 50s, 70s, and now the 80s. She's just nailed it every single time. It's a great summer read, being set on the beach and dealing with a family that's super into surfing and has always lived in Malibu. And I just think it was a fantastic story. Every single sibling has a different secret that they are keeping from their siblings, and all of it ends up coming to a head at this party. You get little glimpses of the other people that show up to the party, which I think there could have been less of, because I just didn't care about them as much as I cared about the main family. I understand why they were there and the purpose that they held, but I just was skimming through them trying to get to the next chapter dealing with the main character. I don't know, I really love this. I think it was a really great story, and I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. In terms of its ranking with the other 2 books I've read by Taylor Jenkins Reid, I think Evelyn Hugo is still my number 1, but I think this overtakes Daisy Jones in the 6 for me. Comes in 2nd place, and then Daisy Jones is 3rd. Next up is kind of an oldie but a goodie. I've had this book on my shelf for much too long. The series itself is now finished, and so I need to get the final book, but this is The Tyrants Tomb, the 4th book in the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. The Trials of Apollo series is the 3rd series set in the world of Percy Jackson, and it follows the main character, Apollo, the Greek god who, after the events of both the Percy Jackson series and the Heroes of Olympus, the sequel series, is cast down to Earth by Zeus as a punishment for his actions, and cursed to live in the body of a puberty-ridden 16-year-old kid who is painfully awkward named Lester. He's tied to another demigod named Meg, who is a daughter of Demeter, and the 2 of them together have to work towards restoring all of Apollo's oracles. They are all failing, and he has to go restore them in order to save the world from an unknown threat. This is the 4th book in the series, so I won't tell you what that threat is or too much about the plot, but I will just say that I love this iteration so much, and I'm really sad to see this series come to a close very soon. I love Percy Jackson and the Percy Jackson world, and I think this is a really interesting take on the Percy Jackson series, coming from the point of view of a god. This really shows Apollo having to kind of deal with the repercussions of godly actions on their demigod children. From the perspective of those children, he has to learn what it really means to be part human and to deal with the gods' moods and their whims at all costs. It really forces him to kind of self-reflect and think about the type of person he has been. Humanity is really taking a toll on him for the better, I think, and I love seeing his evolution as a character. He was one of my favorite side characters in the Percy Jackson series, and I'm loving getting to see him from the main character's point of view and watching him grow and learn and gains a bit more self-confidence, which is weird considering how cocky he is at the beginning of Percy Jackson, but he really does get thrown down quite a few pegs and has to bring himself back up, and I like watching that journey. It has all the great vibes of a Percy Jackson series. It's got all of the fun banter, the witty commentary, all the main characters that you know and love have made appearances so far, I think. And you get the great settings of Camp Half-Blood, Camp Jupiter, and the rest of his fantastic ways of integrating these fantastical settings into this story. Rick Riordan is one of the best writers alive today, I'd say, and his grasp on both history and mythology and adding it into a palatable story for middle grade young adults and adults is something I don't think many people can do nearly as well as Rick Riordan, and I just love being in his world. So 5 out of 5 stars if you can tell. Absolutely adored it. Next up, I read my book club pick for the month, and that is All Boys Are Blue, a memoir manifesto by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir written for a young adult audience, which I've never read before, but really, really enjoyed. George M. Johnson is telling the story of their adolescence and going on their journey of reconciling their identity as both being a queer and Black child, living in America, and the intersectionalities that come with that. If I had to put this book into one word, it would be intersectionality, and just seeing the importance of intersectionality and dealing with the repercussions of one identity in terms of your other identity, in this case being queer and being Black, and trying to reconcile the differences in that, was really pertinent in this story, and it was a really important but heartbreaking story to read from. This story, like I said, is both heartbreaking because there are definitely some moments that you need to look up trigger warnings for, because it is definitely a hard story that George told. However, the overall feeling that I got was inspiring and uplifting. I loved this so much, and I think it was one of the best written memoirs I've ever read. I read it in one sitting, which never happens to me with nonfiction, and I'm really looking forward to George M. Johnson's next memoir, which is going to deal with more with their young adult life and their activism, which I'm very excited to dive into very soon once it comes out. It has some really great photos included in this as well, so if you can pick up the physical book, I would highly recommend it. I'm not reading nonfiction right now, but I do highly recommend this, and I think everybody should read it. Next up, the next book that I read during the month of July was Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. This is a fantastic novel. It is a cozy mystery in a new series by this author considered to be the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mysteries. And this follows our main character, Leela, who has just moved back home from the big city in Chicago after a massive breakup with her cheating boyfriend, in order to come home and help try to save her auntie, her Tita Rosie's restaurant, which is failing. However, after a very public fight with her ex-boyfriend, who also happens to be a scathing and nasty food critic in the town, he ends up dropping dead, and Leela is considered to be the main suspect as he died from poisoning. This story was really great. I loved the characters. I think the characters are what definitely were the backbone of this story, and seeing Leela interacting with both her friends from high school and the new friends that she's met since coming to town, back to town, I should say, as well as the other restaurateurs that she goes to talk to and her family. She's an orphan. She was raised by her Tita Rosie and her grandmother, her Lola, from when she was a young child, and being a Filipino family, she's got a very large extended family that are some family friends, some are actually blood relatives, but it doesn't matter. They are all one big happy family, and it comes with all of the highs and lows that come with a big family. I loved the way that these characters interacted with each other. Every single character was super well thought out and very well developed, I believe, and their interactions with not only the main character but the other side characters were super well thought out, and I think added so much to this story. The mystery itself was really intriguing. It was very cozy, Agatha Christie-esque mystery, and I think it was a fantastic read. I read it in one go again, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Finally, the last book that I read during the month of July was This Thou Can't Last by Isabel Sterling. This is the prequel novella to her main series, These Witches Won't Burn, which is a young adult paranormal queer story centered around a young elemental witch named Hannah. I haven't read the main series yet, but I really adored this prequel. This one I read because it had the word last in the title. I've been interested in this series, and that qualified it for the buzzword pick for the month of July, which was last, which I needed to fulfill. And I really enjoyed it. It was a really great little mini story. It told the story of Hannah and her girlfriend Veronica as they go on this one last final trip before Veronica leaves for university. And it's a class trip to New York City. They end up being caught up in this ages-long war between a group of caster witches, which are witches that deal in potions and spells, and a blood witch, which is a very dangerous type of witch. It was really interesting to have this be my introduction to these characters, but I did really enjoy them. And seeing Hannah and Veronica dealing with their relationship and the initial breaking down of that relationship over the course of this trip, which leads to them being exes in the main story, was really interesting, and I think I really am going to benefit from having read this first. It made me very excited to read the actual series, which the sequel is out now for, I believe, and there's going to be a third one. But either way, it was a great sapphic little witchy story that made me very excited for autumn, and I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and let me know down in the comments below what your favorite book you read in July was. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish videos every week, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye-bye.